The Mandela Effect is one of the most brain-bending and sanity-shattering conspiracy theories to ever grace the internet. This theory is centered around people having different variations of memories about historical events that are actually different from what reality actually reflects. For instance, most people remember the author of the iconic children's stories to be Bernstein Bears, spelled with an E-I-N. However, the name has always been spelled with an A. Wait, it gets a lot creepier than this. This theory was originated by Fiona Broome, who claimed that she remembered Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 1980s, as opposed to becoming president and living until 2014. There are thousands of different Mandela effects, or at least the observations that people argue to be Mandela effects. And while some are very, very compelling, some I'm not completely sold on. I think many can be explained simply due to people misremembering or getting them confused with other similar things. But some of them are really not so easy to explain, and some of them are downright bothersome. For instance, in the 1983 movie, Risky Business, Tom Cruise celebrates his parents going out of town with a flamboyant dancing scene in his living room. Being that this is one of the most iconic scenes in the movie, it was reenacted numerous times by amateurs and professionals alike. But what if I told you that this is actually a digitally doctored version of the film, and in actuality, he does not have sunglasses, and it would appear as though he never has. At least in this reality. So this begs the question, how did so many people, many of them professionals, who are not likely to miss a detail like this, misremember something that was so important? Well, I don't know what the answer is. The fact remains, there is an abundance of people who documented the scene in the way that most of us remember. This phenomenon is known as residue. I believe that the fact that such a large historic record exists while simultaneously contradicting apparent reality is what really takes the Mandela Effect from flat earth territory to legitimately spooky and unexplainable phenomenon. If you think this is weird, then hold on to your hat. Tom Hanks starred in the 1994 drama Forrest Gump, which was about a guy who was a little slow, but who had a big heart. The most iconic quotation from this movie appeared in nearly every single trailer, involved Hank's character's comparison of life being similar to like a box of chocolates. Having seen this movie as a young adult, I remember the dialogue and the scenes quite well. And like most people, I remember this thematic quote going, "Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get." If that's what you remember, then you may be surprised to hear how it is actually said today.
My mom always said, life was like a box of chocolates. Life was like a box of chocolates.
But how did the movie posters, merchandise, and nearly all the promo material all get something like this wrong? Again. It would seem that the word is has been replaced with the word was. Or so it would seem. But something like this, or changing something retroactively, is not possible, right? In spite of this, the amount of contradictory residue that says is instead of was is extremely copious. And if you believe that this is the work of some sort of digital editing or computers, then I urge you, check out your vintage VHS tapes. You may be surprised at what you find. This is the one that originally attracted me to this type of research. Most people recall that King Tut, who was perhaps the most famous of all the Egyptian pharaohs, was buried with a death mask that was adorned with a snake in the center of his forehead, called a uraeus. I have done a good bit of research into this particular symbol, and have often seen it associated with the rising Kundalini spirit. Needless to say, I was very surprised when I saw the current version of what the death mask looks like when I looked it up today. Whenever you're doing research of this sort, it's very important to stress test your theories and come up with ways of trying to discredit them yourself. To that end, I have attempted to find perhaps multiple death masks that might have belonged to the ancient pharaoh, or perhaps another pharaoh who would be very easily confused with King Tut. But sadly, I have not had very much luck in trying to explain the changing with these methods. Although it should not be possible, I'm convinced that this artifact has somehow been altered as though it were an object within a video game. In the 1979 James Bond flick, Moonraker, Bond is seen battling against a comic-like villain called Jaws, who is known for his gigantic metal choppers. Towards the end of this film, Jaws is seen escaping from the wreckage of a crashed cable car, which transitions into a scene where he meets Dolly, who would be his girlfriend. Most recall the scene playing out by having Dolly and Jaws being introduced via Dolly's warm smile, which revealed that, similar to Jaws, she also had a metallic bite in the form of her braces. This was heavily implied to be the connection which bound these two contradictory characters together. However, if you were to watch this scene today, you will notice that the same Dolly does not have braces. And now the scene seems almost artistically forced. In addition, character descriptions that are around today still describe Dolly as being a girl with braces. And there is some other very interesting residue as well. This commercial, which came out about the exact same time as the movie, depicts Jaws interacting with a bank teller who has braces. This is clearly meant to be a reference to Dolly. How does this happen? You got me. And perhaps one of the craziest Mandela effects of all involves the many different changing aspects of the JFK assassination, as well as the Zapruder film, which captured it. For instance, nearly every person who studied the assassination seems to recall John F. Kennedy traveling through Dealey Plaza inside of a 4-door Lincoln Continental. Present in that vehicle were the president, the first lady, as well as the governor of Texas, Jack Connolly, and a Secret Service agent who was driving the vehicle. However, many researchers are astonished when they look at the footage today and they see that the vehicle is much different than they remember. The 4-door 1961 Lincoln Continental has apparently been replaced with a 6-door limousine-style Lincoln Continental, and there are 2 additional people who are traveling inside of it. Those people being Governor Connolly's wife, Nellie Connolly, as well as an additional Secret Service agent. Another very distinct difference in these vehicles is the roll bar, which makes these cars very easy to tell apart from one another. William Cooper, who was a United States author and researcher, wrote about an alternative version of his JFK assassination theory, one that involved the driver being the one who actually shot the popular president. This theory was advanced in the book Behold a Pale Horse, and it was published in 1991, which was long before the Mandela Effect. Although the theory was viewed as at least not completely ridiculous in times past, The theory really seems to just completely self-destruct when faced with the reality of the 6 passengers when we look at it, quote, today. This is getting a little crazy. Although some search engines seem to try to hide this more than others, you will find a very strange hodgepodge of both 4 and 6-door cars if you try to do research into this particular element of this. What is the most troubling is the number of museums that have boasted the 4-door replicas for decades. Of course, it is true that humans make mistakes in great numbers, but it is not often true that these blatant mistakes are made or outright factual inaccuracies are made without being subjected to some sort of brutal public criticism and eventual correction. What I'm saying is, for a museum curator to make such a mistake and it to never be addressed by any form of scrutiny or quality control that might be around him, it just seems highly unlikely. Well, humans are prone to making mistakes. They are even more prone to pointing out the mistakes that are made by others. How could so many different staffs of seemingly competent people all make the same mistake without correction, going on for decades and decades? It's pretty much the same thing as me convincing a whole bunch of other people that camels really have 3 humps. I think that's the core of what makes the Mandela Effect more of a difficult phenomenon to explain. Well, I would be perfectly happy to have all of this disprove it. The fact remains that there appear to be some real conundrums with the Mandela Effect. From our current understanding of the mechanical universe, if someone implied that someone is somehow altering events in the past, that would sound logically absurd. Still, we should remember how dynamic and tenuous the scientific understanding of matter and our reality really are, and how often they change. Okay, so what's really going on? Your guess is as good as mine. Some people have postulated like it's some kind of quantum hackers, for lack of a better term. People that work at places like CERN that have somehow figured out some sort of means of doing stuff like this. To add a little bit of heft to this theory, it seems that some of these specific employees at CERN have signaled that they may have had something to do with the Moonraker changes. But that's just another rabbit hole. Other people have theorized that CERN has somehow collapsed 2 parallel universes into the same reality. But again, that sounds absurd. The problem is, everything about the Mandela Effect is absurd. So what are we going to come up with? Others have argued that the Mandela Effect is proof that human existence really is confined in some sort of matrix-like simulation, and events and objects that span our history are nothing more than digital objects that can be reprogrammed at will. I honestly have no idea what's causing the Mandela Effect, but I am open to suggestions. What do you think is causing it? Write it in the comments below. And also, if you think I'm wrong about my analysis and all of this can be explained by far less mystical means, then please write your argument below in the comments. I'd love to hear it. And if you like this material, please follow and support my work. Thanks.